Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Christopher Hope. Now it's time for an early peek at Chopper's Political Podcast, my weekly podcast we record in our studios in the heart of Westminster. And this week I spoke to the father of the House of Commons, Conservative MP Sir Edward Lee, the longest-serving Tory MP. And he issued to us a stark warning to his party.
By May, we have to come out with an absolute firm immigration policy. Otherwise, we're going to be slaughtered in the May elections.
Wow. And
I'm saying that to the leadership, and people are nodding at me. They're not saying, oh, that's ridiculous, Edward. I'm saying we're going to have a firm immigration policy. As I said, get out of the ECHR. Or you don't have to even say that. You say, get out of any of these conventions that prevent us from arresting people and deporting them. You don't have to have Rwanda. But I've studied this very closely. With Afghanistan, for instance, you simply can't deport people to Afghanistan, Syria. So you have to get rid of all these conventions.
Sir Edward Lee even went on to say this about arch-rival the Reform UK party.
And what are the odds on Reform and the Tories merging to be one party at the next election?
Oh, I think very high. I mean...
odds on?
70%, I should think.
Well, I can't think of anyone else to ask better than that, well, maybe Nigel Farage, than the deputy leader of that party, Richard Tice, who Richard joins us now. Richard, welcome to State of the Nation. Well, you heard the man there, a 70% chance of you lot merging with that lot, the Tory party. Is it on?
Well, the first thing he said, of course, was the Tories are likely to be slaughtered at the May elections. And I think the father of the House is bang on right there. Look, with regard to talks of merger, look, forget it. We're just focusing on doing what we're doing. We seem to be doing it rather well because we're now on average 5, 6, 7 points ahead of the Tories. We're going up, they're going south. And I think very soon people are going to say, hang on, the Tories are splitting the vote. We've heard that phrase before, haven't we, Christopher?
We have done, but the truth is that you really probably can't win power on your own. What you want to do is get in bed and talk to the Tory party. That's what Donald Trump did. He took over the Republican Party back in 2016. Surely you come to an agreement, you find leaders who will do that deal and do it to keep Labour out of a second term of office.
Yeah, but you can't merge with people who fundamentally disagree with you on critical policies. For example, on immigration. The Tories are completely split. They're all over the place on immigration. And the other critical policy where they're with the sort of the eco-zealots, pro-net zero that I think we're going to come on to talk about, we're polar opposites on this. They're quite happy for people's bills and cost of living to be ever higher. They're quite happy for farms to be blighted with solar farms and pylons all across the countryside. These are the damaging consequences of the net zero policy. They're quite happy for jobs to be killed in industries like steel, cars, oil and gas and chemicals. So, yeah, we're poles apart on policies.
Well, we'll come to your net zero plans in 1 second. But just final question on this issue of the two parties coming together. That surely is where you want to be. He said in that podcast interview, he thinks that maybe half the MPs shortly, around 40 MPs so far, want to do a deal with you guys. It may rise to half the party in Parliament. Is that not a chance to do a deal and then take on Labour from one position? I mean, he's jealous of your immigration policy, your net zero legal immigration policy. He wants something like that from his own party, and basically why not come together?
Well, isn't it interesting? They've got 121 MPs in Parliament, and all they're talking about is the fear from reform. We've got 5 MPs. Sounds to me like they're terrified of us. We've got the upper hand. We've got the right common sense policies that are real conservative policies that will make people better off. I'm not sure what their policies are on anything at the moment, but look, I think people want a fresh start and they want some common sense, experienced people to come and sort this country out.
The problem is no one knows who they are. I mean, who is your health secretary? Who's your culture secretary? Who's your work and pension secretary? You've only got 5 MPs. You can't fill these jobs.
Well, when we win the next general election, we'll have hundreds of MPs, and so we will fill these jobs with experienced people. And here's the point. When people say you haven't got the experience, yeah, but I tell you what, we've had all the policy wonks, we've had all the people with PPE from the universities running the country for the last 20 years, and what a scandalous, negligent mess they've made. So frankly, we don't want them anymore.
I got it. Enough of experts. OK, got that. But you've proposed this week 2 taxes, a windfall tax on renewable energy, taxation of farmers utilising land for social solar panels. I thought you were a low tax party, not a more tax party.
What we're doing is saying we want the money back from the renewable rip-offs, from the vast subsidies being paid on renewable energy. And it's a basic common sense statement that the cost of renewables, plus the backup that you need when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, must cost more than backup. So we don't want the renewables that are heavily subsidised, over £10 billion a year and rising. We're saying, on behalf of the taxpayer, we're going to reclaim that back, give it back to consumers with lower bills. That'll lower the cost of living. We're the only party that's on the side of the British people, as opposed to the side of the vested interests, putting up these renewables and putting up our bills.
And you want to mandate underground installation of new power lines rather than loop them across parts of Norfolk and elsewhere. Yet again, that's extremely costly. The reason why that can't happen, the Tories looked at it, was the cost of it. Isn't it a magic money tree and you found it?
But you see, because the Tories are pro-net zero, the consequence of that is that they want to put thousands of massive ugly pylons to blight our countryside and environment. But actually, the National Energy System Operators Report for the East Anglia Network confirmed that over the medium term, by 2034, the cost of putting the cables underground, out of sight, out of mind, would be about the same as the cost of putting them on pylons, when you take into account all the property compensation that would have to be paid. So actually, once again, we're on the side of the countryside, we're on the side of the environment, and on the side of our constituents.
OK, Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you for joining us tonight on State of the Nation. Great to see you. Thank you. With me now in the studio here is PR tycoon and former Labour candidate at the last election, Kevin Craig, and assistant comment editor at the Daily Telegraph, Poppy Coburn. To you first, Kevin Craig, what do you make of the idea that that your opponents could come together as a much bigger mega party for the next election?
Well, let's talk about the 6 months to the run-up to the general election. My observation about Reform and the Conservative Party is that, on the ground, Reform had the more vigorous activist base. I saw more young people overtly for Reform than I did for the Conservative Party. Reform are a much more invigorated organisation. I don't see them coming together, however, because I think Reform have a strategy where they want to dictate that they see that they and the Tories will have enough votes after the next election to do a deal, a coalition. And Nigel, who was on here beforehand, I think has got a little plan to, if he doesn't, which I think is highly unlikely, become the largest party, to demand a lot of things from the Tories. But it's all supposition, and the opinion polls, as we know, are terrible at the moment for the government. But there's a long way to go. I don't think the egos at the top of those two parties will allow a deal.
That is part of the problem, and that's why, in fact, Edward Leake wouldn't tell me or say that Kemi Badenoch will be leader at the next election. We wishes her well. I mean, to you, Poppy Coburn, I mean, Richard Tice is right. Why on earth would they want to do a deal with the Tories when they're ahead and the Tories are becalmed below Labour?
I think he's completely hit the nail on the head. I mean, the problem is we still assume that the Conservatives are either going to improve in the polls or at least continue flatlining. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to keep decreasing. Every single time their party leader goes on television or gets a softball interview, she manages to mess it up. I think we underestimate the extent to which people in the country actually hate the party and want to see it destroyed. And just to pull up something you said about Donald Trump taking over the Republican Party, Trump took over the Republican Party because it had lots of money, lots of serious activists, and was still basically worth taking over. It was a strong institution. The Tories are broke, they have no activists under the age of 90, and it is an institution that is totally discredited. So I don't think that's a fair example. If the Tories go under, how many people are going to be upset about it? That's not true for Reform.
Yeah, the time is perfect, Kevin Craig, isn't it, for Reform UK? Because any time Kemi Badenoch, who probably is not a fan there, but any time she mentions immigration, simply Labour say you let 1 million people in the last calendar year you were in power. I
mean, look, it's early days for the Labour government. I happen to believe that in many areas they're doing a good job, but at the moment the polls are bad because of a number of issues in the first 6 months. But I think that Kemi just can't. You saw PMQs this week. You know, she can't change mid-discussion. She can't pivot. She can't go away from the script and answer questions in a more effective manner. And I think it's the big battle of ideas. I think it's quite interesting. It's about, net zero. Are you in favour or against it, or the jobs it will bring? Are you, if Labour deliver on its immigration pledges, I think it's going to have a strong record.
But she's new. She's got time. I mean, I do think that as we get further away from the Tory record, people will look more kindly at what they're doing. Certainly the final 2 years after Liz Truss was in power, when she got blamed, of course, for the issue of mortgages, the chance isn't enough for that party to rediscover its mojo, and time's on their side.
But what's the big philosophical difference between Reform and the Conservative Party?
That's the problem. What's
Reform
your answer at that?
Reform haven't discredited themselves. That's the massive difference. I mean, the idea that the Tories have time, no, they've run out of time. It's too late. In fact, people are going to continue getting more angry as the consequences of what they've done to this country, the fact we've drowning ourselves in massive debt because of the COVID furlough policy,
but that's not the government's fault, because, I mean,
but of course
COVID happened to everybody, didn't it?
OK, but what about our energy policy, which is ruined?
That's not our fault.
Oh, come on. That's the reason we have the most expensive energy policy, barring Germany, the worst immigration policy I can think of in our lifetimes. These are all policies that people directly associate with the policies of the Conservative government. They're going to dislike them more, not less, and that's where Reform will win.
A big issue for GB News viewers and listeners, Kevin Craig, is net zero. They don't understand what Ed Miliband's on about. He doesn't really, very rarely ever comes on the channel to tell us what he's on about, but we have to read about elsewhere. But what on earth, these net zero policies, the ideas from Reform are quite good, aren't they? Well, taxation on renewable energy and solar panels, everything that Miliband loves.
Well, I think it's good that we debate more energy policy, and I will tell Ed Miliband's team that he should come on here. And
well, he's mad.
Again, well, he's mad not to come on.
Yes, not to come on because we've got a growing audience.
He should come on because the GB News viewers and listeners are an important section of the country. But net zero, we may disagree on this panel. I think it's going to deliver more jobs across the country. I think it's going to help. It's going to be better for the planet. I think it's going to ultimately deliver cheaper bills. And the idea,
when? 2030?
Well, yeah, not. And if it doesn't do it meaningfully before the next election, Labour's going to stand on that record. Just one thing on subsidies. The fact is, more subsidies have gone to fossil fuels in the last 5 years, right? That's just a fact. So why are they singling out the renewable energy sector right now?
Very quickly.
I've got to go. You were completely right. This is supposed to be a party that doesn't like tax. As a consumer who spends a hell of a lot of money on her energy bills every year, why are we somehow saying we're going to reverse net zero policies which have made energy expensive by making them even more expensive? That's a completely nonsensical policy, is it not?
OK. Poppy, thank you. Kevin Craig, thank you. And we're staying with us all through the show.